Close your eyes and drift into the warm twilight of history, where the world softens and time bends to the rhythm of ancient memory. Tonight, let us journey east of Rome, beyond the crumbling columns of the Western Empire, to a place where emperors still ruled beneath golden mosaics and candlelight danced along marble halls. This is the beginning of Byzantium. The Byzantine Empire, also known as the Eastern Roman Empire, was not born in a single moment, nor from a single man. It was the long, slow echo of a world that refused to die. As the Western Roman Empire faltered and fell into the shadows of the 5th century, its Eastern counterpart remained. Stronger, wealthier, and shielded by distance and design, it continued. Roman in law, Greek in language, and Christian in faith. At the heart of this empire stood a city, a dream made stone, Constantinople. Founded by Emperor Constantine the Great in 330 CE, it rose on the ancient site of Byzantium, overlooking the Bosporus, the narrow strait that separates Europe from Asia. Its location was more than symbolic. It was strategic, at the crossroads of continents and empires. Constantinople was a marvel. Its walls, mighty and many-layered, would protect the empire for over 1,000 years. Its churches would rival the beauty of heaven, and its scholars would preserve the knowledge of ages past. But in its earliest days, it was a city of ambition. Constantine envisioned a new Rome, Christian in spirit and imperial in structure. He filled it with palaces, forums, and fountains. He adorned it with relics of saints and statues of pagan gods, bridging the sacred and the ancient. As you fall deeper into rest, imagine walking its streets in the early dawn. The breeze from the sea carries the scent of spices and incense. Merchants prepare their stalls, and robed officials move toward the palace gates. The city is alive with promise. The empire itself was a tapestry of contrasts. It was a place where Greek philosophy met Roman engineering, where desert monks debated theology, and generals planned campaigns that would stretch into Persia and beyond. Unlike the chaotic decline of the West, the Byzantine world retained structure, order, and a vision of continuity. But this vision came with challenges. The Byzantine emperors were more than monarchs. They were guardians of a sacred order. Their authority was divinely sanctioned, and their duty was not only to govern, but to uphold the Christian world. This blending of church and state would define much of Byzantine politics and shape the world to come. Let us pause here, with Constantinople newly born and the dream of Byzantium just beginning. As your breath slows and the night deepens, allow this ancient city to cradle your thoughts. You're at the threshold of a story that spans centuries, a story of power, faith, and resilience. Sleep now, with the echo of empire whispering through your dreams. Chapter 2. The Rise of Constantinople. As the darkness of night gently holds your thoughts, we continue our journey, floating softly into the dawn of a city destined to change the course of history. The rise of Constantinople is not merely a tale of bricks and mortar. It is a story of vision, faith, and imperial ambition. When Constantine the Great looked across the Bosporus in the early 4th century, he saw more than a port town called Byzantium. He saw potential. Rome, the eternal city, was no longer eternal in practice. It had grown too cumbersome, too distant from the shifting borders and new centers of power. Constantine needed a city that was both Roman in authority and strategically placed for the emerging realities of the empire. In 324 CE, after defeating his rivals in a series of civil wars, Constantine became the sole ruler of the Roman Empire. Just 6 years later, in 330 CE, he formally dedicated his new capital, Constantinople, the city of Constantine. He called it Nova Roma, New Rome, but the name that would endure was tied forever to the man who built it. Constantinople was a masterpiece of urban planning. Located on a triangular peninsula flanked by the Sea of Marmara, the Golden Horn, and the Bosporus, it was naturally defensible and ideally suited for trade and military control. Constantine spared no expense in adorning the city. He imported art and architecture from across the empire, columns from Rome, sculptures from Athens, and relics from the Christian world. The city's layout reflected Roman traditions, with a central forum, aqueducts, baths, and circuses. Yet it also embraced Christianity, which Constantine had legalized just years earlier through the Edict of Milan. Churches rose beside temples and crosses were etched into marble facades. The blending of pagan heritage with Christian destiny created a city unique in the ancient world. Among the most significant innovations of Constantinople was its system of walls. The initial fortifications were modest, but in time, under Emperor Theodosius II, the famed triple walls were built. These massive defenses would earn the city its nickname, the Queen of Cities. For nearly 1,000 years, they would keep invaders at bay, but the city was more than stone and steel. It pulsed with life. By the mid-5th century, Constantinople had grown into a cosmopolitan metropolis. Latin and Greek echoed in its streets, mingling with tongues from Syria, Egypt, Armenia, and beyond. Merchants traded silks, spices, and gems. Scholars copied texts and debated philosophy. The hippodrome roared with the cheers of chariot races and political factionalism. The rise of Constantinople was not just a shift in geography. It was the axis on which a new vision of empire would turn. In this city, emperors were no longer just rulers. They were sacred figures, icons of divine order. The Byzantine concept of Basileus, an emperor chosen by God, emerged and would shape governance for centuries. As you sink deeper into sleep, imagine the golden domes catching the sunrise, the call of bells across tiled rooftops, and the slow procession of an emperor through a marble colonnade. The city is awakening, but your mind drifts gently into dreams. Constantinople has risen, and with it, a new chapter in the long story of civilization begins. In the gentle hush of night, the empire begins to breathe more deeply, expanding with dreams of glory. Let us now wander through one of the most dazzling chapters in Byzantine history, the age of Justinian and Theodora. Their reign would reshape the empire and leave a legacy that echoes still in law, faith, and stone. When Justinian came to the throne in 527 CE, the empire was already centuries old. Yet he did not see himself as a caretaker of decline. He imagined restoration, a renewal of Roman greatness. His ambition was vast: to reclaim the western provinces, to unify the faith, to bring order through law, and to build a capital worthy of divine favor. Justinian was born of humble origins, raised in the provinces, and brought to the heart of power by his uncle, Emperor Justin III. But it was not his birth that defined him. It was his vision, and the brilliance of the empress beside him. Theodora, his wife and co-ruler, was unlike any woman who had ever sat beside a Roman emperor. Once an actress, she rose to the heights of power through intelligence, courage, and political skill. She was Justinian's partner in every sense, offering counsel, influence, and strength. In the darkest moments of crisis, it was she who urged him not to flee. One such crisis was the Nika revolt of 532, What began as a dispute between rival chariot factions in the Hippodrome erupted into a week of bloodshed. The city burned, and the palace was nearly overrun. Justinian considered abandoning the throne, but Theodora, with iron resolve, declared that purple is a noble shroud and refused to run. Inspired by her, Justinian crushed the revolt, securing his reign. From the ashes of that rebellion rose one of the most breathtaking monuments in human history, the Hagia Sophia. Built in just 5 years, its dome seemed to float upon light itself. For centuries, it stood as the largest church in the world, a symbol of divine majesty and imperial might. Step softly through its imagined halls. Golden mosaics glitter above, and marble columns echo the grandeur of Rome. Justinian's accomplishments were not limited to architecture. He ordered the codification of Roman law into the Corpus Juris Civilis, a legal framework that would influence Europe for over 1,000 years. His generals, like Belisarius, marched west and reclaimed lands from the Vandals in North Africa and the Ostrogoths in Italy. For a brief moment, it seemed the Roman world might be whole again. But empire has its cost. The wars drained resources, and the Great Plague of 541 devastated Constantinople, killing perhaps a third of its population. Even Justinian fell ill, though he survived. The dream endured, but not without wounds. As your thoughts begin to float, imagine the empress walking through palace halls lit by oil lamps, scrolls in her hand. Picture Justinian studying maps by candlelight, determined to reclaim a forgotten empire. They ruled not with ease, but with fire, fueling an era of greatness through will and faith. Let the silence now carry their story into your dreams, where domes shimmer beneath the stars and laws are etched into marble by unseen hands. As the empire flourished under emperors and endured the storms of time, life in Constantinople unfolded in rhythms both sacred and ordinary. Let us step away from thrones and battles and instead wander the streets of the city, exploring the daily lives of those who lived under golden domes and walked marble paths. Imagine the city at dawn. The sea breeze drifts through narrow lanes. Market stalls open with the scent of baked bread and olives. Bells toll from distant churches. Constantinople was not merely a city of emperors. It was a world of craftsmen, traders, clergy, servants, and scholars. Byzantine society was layered and complex. At its top stood the emperor, surrounded by an elite court. Below them were nobles, generals, and wealthy landowners. But the soul of the city beat strongest among the common folk. Artisans carved ivory and inlaid mosaics. Bakers rose before the sun. Sailors unloaded cargoes from Egypt, Syria, and the Crimea. Religion wove through every part of life. Children were baptized in candlelit chapels. Processions filled the streets on feast days. Homes had icons in every room. People crossed themselves at every church they passed. Priests were present not only for spiritual matters, but in disputes, celebrations, and mourning. Education was highly valued, especially for boys of the urban middle class. They learned to read and write in Greek, studied scripture, history, and rhetoric. Girls were often taught at home, preparing for roles in household and religious life. Though rare, some women became respected intellectuals, especially in convents. The household was the center of life. Most families lived in modest homes made of stone and timber, with small gardens or courtyards. Meals were simple: bread, cheese, olives, fish, sometimes meat. Wine was common, diluted with water. Families gathered in the evening to eat and share news by the flicker of oil lamps. Entertainment came in many forms. The Hippodrome remained a centerpiece of public life, where thousands gathered to watch chariot races and support their favorite factions, the Blues or the Greens. But there were also musicians in the streets, theater performances, and recitations of epic poetry. Ritual and superstition lived side by side. Amulets were worn to protect against the evil eye. People prayed to saints for healing or success. Dreams were taken seriously, believed to carry divine messages or warnings. Work was everywhere. Some were builders and stonemasons, shaping the city's grandeur. Others labored in shipyards or tended livestock outside the walls. Women worked as weavers, midwives, or shopkeepers. Slavery existed as it did across the ancient world, though many slaves could earn freedom over time. As you drift deeper into rest, imagine walking these streets. Hear the murmur of markets, the clatter of sandals on stone, the soft chant of morning prayer. Life in Byzantium was not only about emperors and wars. It was about thousands of small lives woven together in the tapestry of a civilization. Let the peaceful hum of this ancient world lull you now, where the sacred and the simple met in the glow of lanterns and the hush of night. Beneath the soaring domes and behind the marble colonnades of Byzantium, faith shaped the empire's very soul. In no other realm was the bond between church and state so tightly woven. Tonight, we drift into the heart of this spiritual and political union. The Orthodox Church and the Emperor, two forces entwined like gold and fire. From the beginning, Christianity was central to Byzantine identity. Constantine's own conversion in the 4th century marked a turning point, as the Roman world turned its gaze from pagan altars to the cross. But in Byzantium, faith was not just personal, it was political. The emperor was more than a ruler. He was God's representative on earth, chosen not by bloodline alone, but by divine favor. The Orthodox Church, with its rites, mysteries, and icons, stood as both guide and guardian of the empire's soul. Patriarchs of Constantinople held immense power, crowned emperors, and advised on matters of doctrine and law. But the relationship was never simple. It danced between harmony and tension. Liturgies filled the air with incense and chant. In churches great and small, priests read scripture in Greek, not Latin, bringing the word of God closer to the people. The divine liturgy was the center of weekly life, a moment when heaven and earth seemed to meet beneath the shimmering mosaics. Icons held a sacred place in homes and temples. These were not just images, they were windows to the divine, yet even these could divide the empire. In the 8th and 9th centuries, the Iconoclast controversy tore Byzantium apart. Emperors ordered the destruction of holy images, fearing they had become idols. Monks resisted. Churches were defaced. People fought not over land, but over the face of the divine. Eventually, the defenders of icons prevailed. The Seventh Ecumenical Council in 787 affirmed their place in worship. The victory of icons was celebrated as the triumph of orthodoxy, and remains a holy day to this day. The emperor, meanwhile, was crowned in the grand cathedral of Hagia Sophia, not by his own command, but by the hands of the patriarch. His rule was sanctified with holy oil, and he was expected to uphold orthodoxy, lead with justice, and protect the faith. He wore purple not just as a symbol of royalty, but as a mark of divine duty. But emperors were not immune to challenge. When they strayed from faith or failed the people, clergy could speak out, councils could oppose, doctrine could divide. The church was both pillar and mirror, supporting the empire, but also reflecting its failings. Monasteries became centers of learning and refuge. High in the mountains or tucked away on islands, monks copied manuscripts, prayed in silence, and tended gardens. These were not just places of retreat, but of cultural preservation. Some of the empire's greatest thinkers and chroniclers were monastics. As you close your eyes, feel the candlelight flickering in a stone chapel. Hear the slow chant of psalms echoing off ancient walls. In Byzantium, faith was not hidden. It lived in every street, every home, every coronation. Sleep now, wrapped in the calm rhythm of prayer and power, where the sacred shaped the state and emperors dreamed beneath the watchful eyes of saints. In the quiet hours before dawn, let your thoughts settle behind the towering stone walls that protected a city unlike any other. As armies rose and empires fell, Constantinople stood, an eternal bastion of resilience. Tonight, we journey to those mighty ramparts, to the walls of Theodosius, guardians of the Queen of Cities. In the early 5th century, Emperor Theodosius II ordered the construction of a new system of defenses to protect Constantinople. What emerged would become one of the most formidable fortifications in human history. The triple walls that span from the Sea of Marmara to the Golden Horn. The outer wall was lower, but flanked by a wide moat. The second wall, taller and sturdier, was punctuated by towers. Behind it, the inner wall loomed, massive and crowned with battlements. These layers of defense worked in concert, slowing invaders, forcing them into deadly traps, and offering defenders high ground from which to repel assault after assault. For centuries, these walls held strong. They resisted the might of Huns, Avars, Arabs, and Rus. During the siege of 626, Constantinople stood firm against a combined attack by Persians and Avars. In 674, the Arab fleets launched a siege that lasted several years. But the walls endured, aided by the fearsome weapon known as Greek fire. Greek fire was a marvel of Byzantine ingenuity, a liquid flame hurled from siphons impossible to extinguish with water. Its secrets were tightly guarded, known only to a few. When used against enemy ships or infantry, it inspired terror and turned the tide of many battles. But beyond weapons and walls, it was discipline and faith that defended the city. The defenders believed they were not only guarding a city, but preserving a sacred world. Prayers were held in the Hagia Sophia during times of siege. Processions marched with icons, begging divine protection. During the 10th century, Arab chroniclers spoke of Constantinople with awe. To them, it was the city of the Caesar, the impenetrable heart of Christendom. The walls were not just stone, they were legend. Even nature played a role in protection. Earthquakes sometimes damaged the fortifications, but emperors swiftly rebuilt. In 447, a massive quake destroyed long stretches of the walls, but they were repaired within 60 days, an act of urgency and unity that speaks to the city's determination. And yet, these defenses did not isolate Constantinople. Outside the walls, life continued. Fields, monasteries, and villas lined the approaches. The walls marked a boundary, but also a promise that within, the world would endure. As you drift towards sleep, imagine walking the parapets as the stars rise. The wind brushes the towers. Below, the city glows with lantern light. In the distance, the sea shimmers in silver silence. The walls of Theodosius were more than fortifications. They were the bones of a civilization that refused to fall. Rest now within their embrace. As centuries turned and the empire aged, the Byzantine world was never without threat. Tonight, let us walk the perimeter of its borders, not with fear, but with calm reflection, as we explore the empire's greatest external trials. These were the enemies at the gate: the Persians, the Arabs, the Bulgars, and the constant specter of invasion. The Byzantine Empire inherited the ancient rivalry between Rome and Persia. The Sassanid Empire, centered in modern-day Iran, was a powerful and enduring adversary. From the 4th to the 7th centuries, wars flared along the eastern frontier. Cities changed hands, soldiers marched across deserts, and treaties were written in blood. One of the most brutal chapters came during the reign of Emperor Heraclius in the early 7th century. The Persians had overrun Syria, Egypt, and even reached the gates of Constantinople. The True Cross, a sacred Christian relic, was taken from Jerusalem, but Heraclius launched a daring counteroffensive, crossing into Persian lands and eventually forcing a peace. The relic was returned, and the empire breathed again, briefly. For almost immediately after, new winds rose from the south. The birth of Islam in Arabia reshaped the world. Within a single generation, Arab armies had conquered vast lands once ruled by Byzantium. Syria, Palestine, Egypt, all lost. The speed of conquest was astonishing, and yet Constantinople stood firm. The Arab sieges of Constantinople in the 7th and 8th centuries were among the greatest threats the empire would face. The Umayyad Caliphate launched fleets and armies to take the city, but the Byzantine defenses, aided by Greek fire and the indomitable spirit of its people, held. The city's survival was seen by many in the Christian world as a miracle. To the north, new threats emerged. The Bulgars crossed the Danube and established a kingdom that frequently clashed with Byzantine ambitions. In time, they would become not only enemies but also cultural neighbors, influenced by Byzantine religion and art. Wars were frequent, some brutal, others followed by diplomacy and intermarriage. The Rus, seafaring warriors from the lands of modern Ukraine and Russia, also appeared. In 860, they launched a surprise attack on Constantinople, reaching the city by sea. Though the city was spared a full invasion, the raid left a lasting impression. In later years, these same Russes would become Orthodox Christians, baptized in the Byzantine rite, and begin a cultural exchange that would outlast the empire itself. Despite all these dangers, the Byzantines adapted. They developed themes, military districts where soldiers lived on the land they defended. They trained armies to respond quickly to raids. They fortified their cities and rebuilt what was lost. The empire shrank at times, but it did not vanish. As you drift into the stillness of sleep, hear the soft echo of marching boots, the creak of ship masts on dark seas, and the silent watch of guards along the walls. The enemies were many, but the empire, held together by faith, strategy, and sheer will, endured. Let the memory of resilience guide you into dreams, where borders shift, but the spirit stands eternal. As time flowed onward and the storm of war briefly calmed, Byzantium entered an era of brightness, a cultural spring known as the Macedonian Renaissance. Tonight, let us linger in the glow of this rebirth, when art flourished, learning deepened, and the empire, though often threatened, radiated an inner strength. The Macedonian dynasty began with Basil Fern in 867 CE, a man of humble origin who rose through the ranks to seize the throne. His reign marked the beginning of nearly 2 centuries of relative stability and expansion. Under his successors, especially Leo VI and Constantine VII, the Byzantine Empire reached new heights, not just in territory, but in culture and governance. This era is called a Renaissance, not because it looked backward, but because it revived and renewed. Byzantine scholars copied and preserved classical Greek texts, works by Homer, Plato, and Aristotle that might otherwise have been lost to time. They did not merely store these books, they studied, interpreted, and taught them. Constantine VII, known as Porphyrogenitos, born in the purple, was both emperor and intellectual. He authored manuals on statecraft and foreign relations, leaving behind works like De Administrando Imperio, a guide for ruling an empire. His court became a hub of scholarship and diplomacy, attracting visitors from Armenia, the Slavic world, and even distant lands like the Caliphate and the Holy Roman Empire. Art and architecture flourished. Mosaics from this period shimmered with subtle detail and spiritual depth. Churches were restored, and new ones rose with graceful domes and airy sanctuaries. The icon, long a symbol of Byzantine devotion, evolved into a form both intimate and majestic, less rigid, more human, yet still divine. Theologians deepened Orthodox thought, exploring the nature of Christ and the sacraments with poetic precision. Hymns filled the air with beauty and solemnity. Monastic life bloomed, especially on Mount Athos, where silence and study shaped the soul. This Renaissance also reached the legal and administrative heart of the empire. New legal codes clarified justice. Tax reforms stabilized the economy. Military strategy advanced through detailed manuals. Governance became more efficient, blending tradition with thoughtful reform. It was also a time of expanding diplomacy. Byzantium was no longer just defending itself, it was shaping the world around it. The Christianization of the Slavs and the baptism of Prince Vladimir of Kiev in 988 CE were milestones. Byzantine clergy, architects, and artists traveled north, planting the seeds of Orthodox Christianity that would flourish far beyond the empire's borders. As you gently drift, picture a scholar by lamplight translating ancient verses. See golden tiles catch the morning light in a newly built chapel. Hear the distant chant of monks echo through marble halls. The empire, long besieged, now blossoms within. In the quiet of this Renaissance, Byzantium found not only survival, but beauty, purpose, and vision. Rest now in the glow of learning and light. Beyond the throne and beyond the battlefield, there was a stage no less powerful, the imperial court. Tonight, as night settles like silk over the empire, let us slip behind the palace gates and observe the rituals, intrigues, and pageantry of the Byzantine court. The imperial court of Byzantium was a world unto itself. Here, every gesture had meaning, every robe conveyed status, and every word spoken in the palace chambers could change the fate of empires. Protocol was sacred, designed to reflect the divine nature of the emperor's authority. The emperor was not merely a man of power. He was a living icon, God's chosen ruler on earth. When he appeared, it was through layers of ceremony. He might emerge from behind a golden curtain, beneath the dome of a palace chapel, flanked by priests and officials. His garments shimmered with purple silk, embroidered with gold. The air was heavy with incense. All who approached him bowed low and sometimes kissed his feet. Palace life revolved around the great palace of Constantinople, a sprawling complex that included gardens, chapels, audience halls, and secret chambers. The Chrysotriklinos, the Golden Hall, was the heart of it all, where the emperor received ambassadors and held court. Its walls glowed with mosaics, and its throne sat beneath a canopy shaped like a celestial dome. Intrigue was the court's silent companion. Eunuchs, who held great power in the Byzantine bureaucracy, often served as chamberlains and intermediaries. Some rose to be kingmakers, shaping succession and steering policy. Spies whispered through corridors, and factions formed behind every curtain. Power could be granted and taken without warning. Even in times of peace, plots simmered. Brothers turned on brothers, generals eyed the throne, and nobles wove silent conspiracies. The imperial court was not just the center of government. It was a battlefield of minds and masks. Yet alongside these dangers lived extraordinary beauty and intellect. The court patronized poets, philosophers, and artists. Foreign dignitaries from as far as China, Ethiopia, and the Franks marveled at the refinement of Byzantine diplomacy. Diplomats received lavish banquets, musical performances, and gifts designed not only to impress, but to reflect the empire's claim to universal rule. The empress also played a key role. Whether seated beside the emperor or ruling in her own right, she was adorned in regalia just as sacred. Figures like Irene, Zoe, and Theodora held real power, commanded loyalty, and issued edicts. They were not shadows behind thrones, but forces within the palace walls. The court was a theater of order. Its rituals, refined over centuries, gave a sense of permanence in a world of uncertainty. It reminded the empire and its enemies that Byzantium was not just enduring, but eternal. As you rest your thoughts, picture golden torches flickering in marbled halls. Listen to the soft rustle of silk, the distant echo of a hymn, the cautious shuffle of footsteps behind a veil. Here, in this world of elegance and danger, the empire breathed its most intimate and intoxicating life. Sleep now within the court's embrace, where power whispers through shadow and light. Sleep may soften time, but some moments cut through history like blades. Tonight, we drift into one of the most painful episodes in the Byzantine story, the coming of the Crusaders and the Fourth Crusade that shattered the Queen of Cities. By the dawn of the 13th century, the Byzantine Empire was weakened by internal strife and external threats. Emperors rose and fell with increasing rapidity. The treasury strained under war and corruption. Still, Constantinople stood, glorious, golden, guarded. Then came the Crusaders. The original purpose of the Crusades had been to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim rule. But politics, debts, and ambition twisted this vision. In 1202, a new crusade formed in the west. The Venetians, masters of the sea, had agreed to transport the army. But when the Crusaders could not pay, the Venetians demanded compensation. And so, the crusade was diverted. First, they attacked the Christian city of Zara. Then, lured by a Byzantine prince seeking to reclaim his throne, they turned their ships toward Constantinople. In 1203, the Crusaders arrived. The city's defenders were caught in confusion. The young claimant, Alexios IV, was installed, but he could not fulfill his promises to his Western allies. Tensions rose. In April 1204, the Crusaders stormed the walls. The sack of Constantinople was brutal. Churches were looted. Icons were smashed. Relics, collected for centuries, were carried away to Western cathedrals. The Hagia Sophia itself was desecrated, its altars torn apart, its treasures stolen. Horses were led through the nave. Gold and silver vanished into greedy hands. Thousands died. Fire consumed entire districts. Nuns were violated, monks slain. It was not just conquest, it was devastation. The Byzantines watched in horror as their sacred city was torn apart not by Muslims nor Persians, but by fellow Christians. For over 50 years, the empire as it had been ceased to exist. The Latin Empire of Constantinople ruled from the ruins. Byzantine nobles fled to Nicaea, Epirus, and Trebizond, clinging to fragments of what was lost. But Byzantium was not gone. In 1261, the exiled forces of the Empire of Nicaea retook the city. They entered not as conquerors, but as mourners reclaiming a ghost. The city was broken, its people scattered, its glory dimmed. Yet, the flame still flickered. This trauma carved deep wounds. The trust between East and West never fully healed. The Orthodox Church, already separate in belief and ritual, grew distant from Rome. The idea of Christian unity faded into bitterness and memory, and yet, through the ashes, the empire endured. Smaller, poorer, but unbroken in spirit. Its art, faith, and traditions survived. Its scholars continued their work. Its churches opened their doors once more. As your eyes grow heavy, imagine the city under stars, quiet now after fire and sorrow. Lanterns burn in rebuilt chapels. Children play among broken columns. The city breathes again. Let your dreams carry the resilience of a wounded empire that refused to fade into silence. As the empire awoke from the ashes of conquest, its people faced a world forever changed. Tonight, we return to the broken halls of Constantinople, not to grieve, but to witness the slow and steady breath of restoration. This is the story of exile and return, of fragmentation and fragile hope. After the sack of 1204, the Byzantine world was shattered into pieces. Constantinople fell under Latin control, but three Greek successor states emerged: the Empire of Nicaea in western Anatolia, the Despotate of Epirus in the Balkans, and the Empire of Trebizond on the Black Sea. Each claimed to be the true heir of Byzantium. Among them, Nicaea stood strongest. Led by capable rulers like Theodore the Sur Lascaris and John III Vatatzes, it preserved the traditions, institutions, and faith of the fallen capital. The emperors of Nicaea rebuilt schools, defended Orthodox Christianity, and restored imperial dignity even in exile. Life in Nicaea echoed the rhythms of old Constantinople. Processions, liturgies, and scholarship continued. While the Latin rulers in Constantinople struggled to maintain order, Nicaea gathered strength. Slowly, patiently, it reclaimed lands in Western Asia Minor and reached toward the Bosporus once more. In 1261, under the leadership of Michael VIII Palaiologos, an opportunity arose. The Latin garrison in Constantinople was away on campaign. Byzantine forces entered the city by stealth. There was no grand battle, just quiet steps through ruined streets. The banner of Byzantium rose again above the palace. But what they returned to was no longer the shining capital of old. Constantinople was damaged, depopulated, and impoverished. Much of its grandeur was gone. The restoration of 1261 was spiritual and symbolic more than material. The empire had returned, but it was smaller, weaker, and surrounded by new dangers. Michael VIII worked to rebuild. He restored churches, repaired walls, and revived institutions. But he also faced resistance from within. His crowning came with controversy, as he had blinded and deposed a child emperor to seize power, and his attempts to reconcile with the Roman Church in hopes of securing Western support angered many of his subjects. In the following decades, the restored Byzantine Empire struggled to hold its ground. The Ottomans were rising in Anatolia. The Serbian Empire grew powerful to the northwest. Internally, civil wars, palace intrigues, and economic hardship eroded the foundations of recovery. Yet even in decline, Byzantine culture persisted. Artists painted icons of profound beauty, monks preserved texts and taught theology. Diplomats negotiated tirelessly to delay the end. The flame of identity, though battered, refused to extinguish. As you drift deeper into sleep, imagine a quiet chapel lit by flickering oil lamps. Outside, the city stirs slowly, its wounds healing under the care of those who refuse to abandon it. The sound of a distant bell marks the passage of time. The empire was no longer whole, but it had returned. And as long as Constantinople stood, so too did the dream of Byzantium. Rest now, with the memory of return wrapped gently around your thoughts. Let the night deepen and quiet your breath. For now, we reach the twilight of an empire. This is the fall of Constantinople, a moment when centuries of faith, ambition, and resilience gave way to the inevitable tide of change. Tonight, we walk slowly with the last Byzantines into the final chapter of their ancient world. By the mid-15th century, the Byzantine Empire had become a shadow of its former self. It was little more than the city of Constantinople and a few scattered territories. The Ottomans surrounded it on all sides. Their empire was young but rising, strong and resolute. At its head stood Sultan Mehmed II, a brilliant and determined ruler. From a young age, he had dreamed of taking Constantinople, not only for its wealth or position, but for its symbolism. To him, it was the city of Caesar, the crossroads of worlds, and the seat of empire. The Emperor of Byzantium, Constantine XV Palaiologos, ruled with courage in the face of despair. He had little wealth, few allies, and fewer soldiers. Still, he refused to surrender. In early 1453, as Ottoman forces prepared for siege, he called upon every soul in the city, Greeks, Latins, merchants, monks, to stand together. The siege began in April. Mehmed brought with him tens of thousands of troops, powerful cannons, and a navy to block the sea. Among his weapons was a massive bombard, capable of shaking the very walls of Theodosius. For weeks, the defenders resisted. They patched walls, repelled assaults, and prayed beneath the dome of Hagia Sophia. The city held, but day by day, the strain grew. On the night of May 28, 1453, as the final assault loomed, a great liturgy was held in Hagia Sophia. Greeks and Latins, long divided by theology and politics, stood side by side in prayer. Candles flickered, hymns rose to the golden dome. It was a moment of unity at the end of time. In the early hours of May 29th, the final assault began. Waves of Ottoman soldiers rushed the walls. The defenders fought with desperate valor, but the walls, old and worn, finally gave way. Constantine XV, clad in armor, vanished into the fighting. He was never seen again. Some say he died sword in hand. Others whisper he lives in marble, waiting to rise again. But the city was lost. Mehmed entered not as a destroyer, but as a conqueror. He rode to Hagia Sophia, now silent, and ordered it be transformed into a mosque. The city would rise again, but not as Byzantium. It would become the heart of a new empire, Ottoman, Islamic, and imperial. For those who lived through that dawn, it was not only the fall of a city, it was the end of an era. Yet even in ruin, the spirit of Byzantium lingered. Its scholars fled west, carrying manuscripts and memories. Its liturgies continued in distant monasteries. Its influence flowed into the Renaissance, into Orthodox faith, into history itself. As you sleep, hear the echo of bells and the silence that followed. The empire's gone, but its story, its soul, endures. Rest now, with the last lights of Constantinople still glimmering in your dreams. Though the empire fell, its echo did not fade. Tonight, let us walk beyond the fall, into the quiet legacy left behind. Byzantium was more than its walls, its emperors, or its armies. It was a civilization whose memory shaped worlds far beyond its borders. In the East, the Orthodox Church remained Byzantium's most enduring gift. Even as Constantinople changed hands, the faith it had nurtured took deep root in lands like Russia, Serbia, and Georgia. Byzantine liturgies, theology, music, and monastic traditions continued, unchanged in spirit, even when practiced in new tongues. The Patriarch of Constantinople, though now under Ottoman rule, retained spiritual leadership over millions of Orthodox Christians. Hagia Sophia, though converted into a mosque, still whispered the architecture of divine vision. New churches across Eastern Europe echoed its domes and mosaics. In the north, Russia began to see itself as the heir of Byzantium. When even the Third of Moscow married Sophia Palaeologina, niece of the last emperor, he adopted the double-headed eagle and the title of Tsar, Caesar. Moscow, they said, was the Third Rome, the successor to Rome and Constantinople. Byzantine art and learning spread westward as well. After the fall of the city, many Greek scholars fled to Italy, bringing with them ancient manuscripts, knowledge of Greek, and classical philosophy. These exiles became bridges between the ancient world and the European Renaissance. In law, the influence of Justinian's legal codes echoed through centuries, shaping civil law in Europe. In diplomacy, the rituals and subtleties of the Byzantine court became models for later empires. Even in urban planning, echoes of Constantinople could be found in the capitals of the world. But Byzantium's legacy is not only in what it gave to others, it is in the memory it left of endurance. An empire that lived for over 1,000 years, that survived invasions, plagues, betrayals, and exile, left behind a story of resilience unlike any other. To those who seek wisdom in history, Byzantium offers a lesson. That splendor can be matched with discipline, that faith can endure beyond walls, and that the light of culture and thought can shine even when surrounded by darkness. As you rest tonight, picture a candle flickering in a distant chapel, a monk copying a sacred text, a dome reflecting starlight above a silent city. These are the threads of Byzantium, woven not only into history, but into spirit. Its empire may be gone, but its vision, its voice, and its beauty live on. Sleep now, embraced by the quiet presence of a world that never truly disappeared. Now, as we reach the final moments of our journey, let your thoughts drift gently through time. Byzantium is no longer on the map, but its essence lingers, subtle, enduring, luminous. Tonight, in this last quiet reflection, we listen to the echoes of Byzantium in the modern mind. What makes an empire eternal? Is it the breadth of its armies, the wealth in its coffers, or the stones of its cities? Or is it the ideas it preserves, the beauty it inspires, the resilience it teaches? Byzantium offers no easy answer, only a mirror in which civilizations may glimpse themselves. For over 1,000 years, the Byzantine Empire stood at the crossroads of worlds. It was not simply a successor to Rome. It was a synthesis of East and West, of classical heritage and Christian devotion. It stood as a beacon of literacy, law, theology, diplomacy, and endurance. Today we walk through cities far from Constantinople and still find traces of its soul in domed cathedrals and glimmering mosaics, in the chanting of Orthodox liturgies, in legal systems shaped by ancient codes, in the pages of books once nearly lost. Byzantium lives on in the very rhythm of memory. It also lives on in metaphor. Scholars still speak of Byzantine complexity, a reflection of its layered court, its intricate diplomacy, its paradoxes. To some, the word conjures mystery, to others, beauty. But always, it suggests something deeper than surface. The modern world, so often in motion, can pause and learn from Byzantium's stillness, from its slow rituals, its attention to sacred time, its reverence for tradition and thought. In a world that rushes forward, Byzantium reminds us to linger. The city of Constantinople is now Istanbul, a vibrant, living place with its own rhythm. Hagia Sophia still stands, majestic in silence, bridging centuries of change. And beneath it all, stones laid by hands long gone continue to bear the weight of faith and time. As you sink fully into rest, imagine those stones. Imagine a lone monk centuries ago, writing by candlelight in a quiet cell. He does not know if his work will survive, but he writes. Because to preserve beauty, to honor truth, to remember, this is the calling of every age. And so, as you sleep, remember this. Byzantium is not lost. It is remembered in silence, in learning, in dreams. Sleep well now, with the echoes of 1,000 years gently wrapped around your soul.